So I say there's a little over 3% more light on the planet now than there was a year ago. About 2% or of that, 66%, is what I would call the classic light, regular light. About 33% of that, 3%, is new light. It's new light. We've been talking recently with the groups here at the Chambra Pavilion about new light, what it is, what it does. But when you feel into it, you have this infusion now of light, which is consciousness, and then new light coming in. And oftentimes that new light it seems elusive. You're not familiar with it like you are with regular light. So there is kind of an assumption that there's nothing there, but actually there really is. So there's a difference between new light and classic light. Regular light, as in the light we talk about coming from consciousness, then energy, and then light. That light is imagination. Just like energy is simply the song of the soul, it's communication. Light is imagination. You know, you could say, well, on a scientific level, it's got certain qualities and it has photons and it's got wavelengths and but no, at its core, true light is imagination. And when you think about it, when you imagine, you are creating, you're calling energy into service, and then it transforms into light, which eventually works its way down into your reality. So there's a lot of that light coming in. And those of you who were realm workers, you dealt with that light, the light of imagination. Imagination not meaning you're making it up, because you can't make anything up. Imagination meaning that you're expanding, you're opening up, you're imagining. And that's what a creator does. They imagine. They imagine other realms like this planet Earth. They imagine universes. They imagine being micro. They imagine being macro. They imagine being God. They imagine being human. That's the beauty of the soul. It can imagine. It's the beauty of a light. It carries that and it makes it so. What is light? Well, I contend that light is imagination. Whereas you have consciousness is awareness, energy is communication, light is imagination. Now, it causes you to maybe scratch your head. What does he mean by that? I use my imagination, but it's this kind of wacky part of my brain my daydreaming side of the brain. Not at all. Imagination is the very thing that brings reality together, makes reality possible. It uses energy. And then it is imagined by either you or what you would call your soul or your master. The master being master self, sometimes called the oversoul. It's the culmination, the collective of all your human lifetimes. They are all imagining. Right now, your soul is imagining. It's using light. It is light. The master is imagining. And imagining doesn't necessarily mean, doesn't have to be a desire or a want. Imagining is just feeling into, well, your consciousness, basically, your reality, your experiences. And to go a step further, true imagining actually does not come from the brain or what you would call the mind. The brain mind has its own kind of quasi-imagination abilities, but it's relatively limited to what it's known in the past. I call it qualia, the association from something that happened before. So your mind uses a kind of a cheap version of imagination, but it's all based on something you've seen or done or heard before. It could be from a pickup line from a movie or something that you read about or your own personal experiences. And the mind imagines that. There's a beauty in it. You want the mind to be able to imagine. You want the mind to be able to take all of the stories that you've had and imagine them in different ways. The light is imagination. The moment one imagines, energy is brought forth and transformed into light. That light ultimately creates what you would call reality. The human tries to imagine themselves as being rich or famous, but what generally happens is the human self-defeats. Their own, they do their own form of energy feeding. And 1 minute imagining themselves as rich and famous and helping everybody on the planet or whatever it happens to be. And the next minute, the mind is also pulling all the old data records and saying, no, you're a failure. You couldn't do that if you tried. You don't have the magic. You don't have the intelligence. You don't have the money or whatever it is. So imagination often becomes self-defeating. The true imagination comes beyond the mind. And yes, the human can do it because you don't need to be in the mind or the brain to truly imagine. There is something beyond that, and not just the master or the soul, but there's something for the human beyond that. And as more and more light comes in, even if it feels uncomfortable at times, it is also bringing in more potential for imagination, more unlimited imagination. And that's what's happening right now. The mind doesn't always register it because it's beyond the mind's purvey or beyond its ability to remember. But it's happening, and that creates even more discomfort because you know something is happening. You know it's happening, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Light is imagination. And not just the imagination of the human, but of the master. The master is imagining right now all of its lifetimes, because they're all taking place at the same time isn't the right word, but they're all taking place in the same kind of sequence, in the same circle. So all the lifetimes are taking place, and the master is imagining these, including the imagination from the enlightened lifetimes, and finally the ultimate lifetime of ascension. The master doesn't worry about getting there. The master doesn't even worry about how to use the light because, well, that's what it does best. The master is imagining now itself as the human coming to its first understanding, real understanding of light. And that's what you're experiencing. The master doesn't jump in and interfere and say, here's what to do, here's how to do it, but you can access that part of self at any time, as you can access the soul. Part of Heaven's Cross opened those doors as well. But very few Shambhar are venturing outside the limitations of their mind or body or their very limited environment. But ultimately, light is imagination. Imagine that for a moment. Light is just imaginings of the soul, the master, and the human. So you say, so if the soul is imagining and the master is imagining, how come I'm not receiving the benefits of it? How come, it seemed that I'm so blocked out from it? Well, partly it's just an old bad habit, and partly because the master and the soul would never inflict that on you. You're there to experience it for yourself in human form and to understand that it's the same light as the master or the soul, but now it's up to you. What do you want to do with it? Where do you want to go with it? How do you want to bring light into your life? If you just brought in more imagination, what does that mean? What does that mean? More imagination. And not just the type of daydream imagination or dreamy time imagination, but more potentials. More potentials. Breaking out of old ruts, breaking out of limitations. You can imagine now, you're free to imagine as you want because there's more light. And as you imagine, as you feel into it and imagining, then it starts shaping into reality at some point. so you can be in the imagination, not just imagining it, but literally being into it. You don't have to imagine yourself as being young or wealthy or anything like that. The imaginations are more into things like joy. Just imagine joy. Imagine peace of mind. So all this is taking place right now. It's taken a year after Heaven's Cross to bring in that light, absorb it, get familiar with it, get used to it. And now it is time for us to start using it.